guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Kat. Today I'm going to be doing a book review for one of the best books that I have read in a very long time, and that is My Absolute Darling by Gabriel Tallent. So this book is a really recent publish. It was brought out by Riverhead Books in August 29th of this year, and I heard absolutely amazing things about it, and a lot of elements in the story are things that usually I really like, and for some reason the blurb just grabbed me and I wanted to read it. So I got it immediately and read it, and I was just blown away. So My Absolute Darling follows a young girl named Turtle Alveston who is 14 years old, and she lives on the North Cali coast in Mendocino. The way that Tallent describes the coastline and the woods there is just really evocative and really lovely and lush, and actually that element of his writing really reminds me of Jack London. I looked up pictures of what the area looks like, and it is just so lovely, almost primordial. So when you are introduced to Turtle, she has just come home from school and she's coming in her front door, and she picks up a gun which is laying amongst shells, and she proceeds to fire at targets. So from the very beginning, Turtle lives in a world that is foreign to probably most of us, and it seems like there's a little sliver of an adult within this 14-year-old child, and you're not sure why. Why is the house in such disrepair? Where are the parents? Why are there guns lying around? And why, more importantly, does she know how to shoot them? And why does she have to shoot them? Why is she shooting? So from the very beginning, I was pulled into it. After that, you're introduced to Martin, who is her father, and her father believes that a lot of things in the world have gone really wrong, and he's kind of an eco-warrior, and sometimes he is brilliant and he sounds very lucid, and sometimes he seems really tortured and quite insane. So in this type of environment, Martin has turned his twisted love of Turtle and of what he thinks the world should be into this really warped environment for a 14-year-old girl to grow up in. And that's just the beginning. From there, the story just gets so much more involved, and just, it is such an amazing, amazing look at what it means to grow up, what a family is, how to survive when surviving isn't enough, when you have to break free, if physically escaping is the same as mentally escaping, and vice versa. What's the role of nature in society, and how do we change ourselves? How do we go beyond what we have been raised to be? One of the elements that I thought really, really was the backbone of the novel was the writing style that Tallent uses. So he uses a third person limited, which is interspersed with flow of consciousness. And what I mean is, it will be third person limited in the paragraph, and then it will say Turtle thought, and then it will just be her speaking for a few paragraphs. So you're pulled immediately into her mind. And I read some reviews where readers just couldn't get into the mindset. They had a really hard time. It felt like they were being jerked around. And I understand where they are coming from. I see how that could be the case for you. For me, it was the exact opposite. Like, I was third person following her around, and then when she switched to using I was just pulled in with her, and I felt everything she felt, and it was really visceral, and I am absolutely in love with his writing style, and I think it is really original, really unique, and that element of the story really stands out to me, and I just was totally blown away. So we have come to the part where I say, if you don't want any spoilers, then please leave now, because I loved this book so much. I really want to do it a full review. So beyond this point right now, there will be spoilers. So if you want to read the book, then please go read it and then maybe come back. But please don't spoil yourself if you haven't read it, because it is well worth the read. Overall, I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, and it is just mind-blowingly good. It is so amazing. Okay, so now we're gonna get into kind of a more in-depth look in the book. So as I said before, you are introduced to both Turtle and her father Martin, and Martin is seen as kind of a very feverish, passionate man, where sometimes his passion is shown in the warped love and the extreme possessive feelings he has for Turtle and the world that they have built. And other times he manifests in forms of extreme violence and almost borderline insanity. Turtle, for her part, exists in two worlds. Her school, where she tries to be invisible. She doesn't want to be noticed by anyone. She doesn't want anyone to take interest in her for the fear that they will rip her out of her life with her father, who is basically the center of her world. And she is only 14, so she doesn't exactly realize why she has to protect something if it is so natural and if it is so good. There's something in her that always realizes that there's something a little wrong. She's not sure if it's her or if it's him or if it's how they live, but something about them and the way that they live is different than the other people. There are a lot of juxtapositions in this book. There is man versus nature, society versus kind of independent living. There is man versus woman. There is the really warped duo family of Turtle and her father versus everyone else. It's basically them versus us. And the natural world that she lives versus her inner world where she struggles with kind of the emotional and physical abuse that is inherent in her childhood. I read an interview where Tallent was talking about how at first he was really nervous to go down such a dark path with the book, and he thought that he really wanted to write Turtle as a character because she is such a phenomenal female character to write, and I totally agree. She is one of my favorite female characters I have read this year, if not of my entire life, and I am so glad that he did decide to make it as dark as it is. And it is very dark at times, so there are major triggers for physical abuse, mental abuse, incest, rape, and overall violence, whether it be with fists or with guns or with knives. Because this is the spoiler section, I'm going to go into all the different dark elements that I think really were necessary and so vital, and I'm so glad that he included them. So first, let's talk about the really dark situation itself. Just first off, there is the utter isolation. Her father always tells Turtle, you can't tell them anything about us. Basically, you can't bond, you can't have friends, you can't have anyone, any mentor other than me. I am your everything. I am your mentor, your father, your lover, your best friend, your boyfriend. I am everyone to you. I am the beginning and I am the end of everyone that you will ever know and should ever know. And from the beginning, it is so unsettling when you realize that that is kind of the environment that she is in. And immediately you're rooting for Turtle because just the insane abuse of adulthood that Martin is using to control her is just extremely dark, and I think it sets up the story really well from the very beginning. And then of course the physical world, their house is falling apart, and you find out that it wasn't always that way. When Turtle's mother was alive, the house was flourishing, and there were orchards, and there were flower fields, and there were roses that bloomed, and in fact the roses were so beautiful that people would come from all around to look at them. So you kind of realize that after the mother's passing, something broke in Martin, and times changed, and the house is a real representation of that. It is not only decaying, but it is falling in upon itself as well as outside forces acting upon it. So what you really see is the raccoons coming in and the rats coming in, and they're cleaning the dishware, and they're all over the floor and in the sink, and really it's nature is trying to retake what Martin has lacked to put out there. He doesn't care about the battle between nature and his own house because he himself at one level of his consciousness realizes that what they have is not natural and can't hold up under duress. It just has to be him and Turtle, and nothing else can be involved. So let's talk about the dark elements involving things Martin teaches Turtle. In this vein, I'm going to say there's two things. One is violence. So from an early age, he gives Turtle guns, and I think she's given her first gun when she is 6, and she is taught to shoot, and he says that she has to give herself over to death, and she has to be aware of what it means to like lose your body and lose a part of yourself, and for there to be danger of your mortal like being. And that is really heavy stuff to tell a 6-year-old. So we meet Turtle after she's been going through that for 8 years already, and she's 14. So now she's a sharpshooter, and she thinks that being able to kill animals and skin them and gut them is completely normal and completely fine for a 14-year-old to be able to do. And we see other instances of physical abuse where, for instance, he makes her do pull-ups on the beam and he holds a knife under her legs. And that moment for me was a distillation of just utter horror. I was stuck in that moment and just realizing like how impressionable a 14-year-old would be, and then for her to go through that is just, I hated Martin more than I hated him. I just wish that he had just been struck by lightning at that moment and I could have been like, oh, good, he's gone. I just feel like that just pinned me, and I cried. Like, it was so upsetting, that scene, but I think it's really worth it because it is a great juxtaposition against the kind of other things that Martin teaches her. So not only does he physically intimidate her and basically take domain over her physical body, which you see as well in his types of molestation and sexual abuse of her from when she was a child, but also in the way that he controls her views of women and the way that he manages to break any type of language that she would have with her own natural body. So he refers to her as kibble, which is dog food, and slit, which is obviously a horrible term for a young girl, for anyone, period. And basically, he thinks all women are whores and sluts and worse. So when Turtle interacts with other women, she has a complete lack of ability to do so because she basically just hears amplifications of her father's voice overlaying what she is experiencing. So as her teacher is talking to her and trying to break through, all Turtle can give back is these horrible things about how this teacher is a woman and she's a horrible human and she should just die and she never understands. And you know that it's not actually Turtle that thinks that, it's that she has been impressed from young from Martin, and it is also heartbreaking. So from the beginning, you see that Martin has really broken Turtle physically, using violence and sexual violence, and also emotionally. He has basically cut her off from everyone. I think that the elements of darkness in the book are so necessary because it allows you to really track the changes in Turtle as the book goes on. So for instance, when Turtle starts to feel doubt, or she doesn't know it as doubt, but she knows something is wrong, she knows something is off kilter, and she can't explain why. She's only 14, she doesn't exactly understand, but she knows something is off. So she sets off into the woods, and I feel that in the book, the woods really represents a place for escapism. And it's one of these times where she goes into the woods and is trying to kind of get away from Martin's domain and clear her mind and try to take stock of where she is and what's happening. And this is when she stumbles upon the two boys, Jacob and Brett. And Jacob and Brett were a really fresh breath of air in this novel because between the nature imagery and also just the very, very dark and gritty elements of the family life, then these two boys were just like sunshine. And what happens is they were lost in the woods and Turtle eventually helps them and makes shelter for them. But instead of ridiculing her or being scared of her, they see Turtle as an awesome provider and a survivalist, which she certainly is, and they become a spark in her life where she has something to compare against. She just knew something was off, but she didn't have anything to kind of be like, well, if this is how my situation is, how is the other side? And one of the scenes that really stuck in my mind as a great illustration of this is when she goes down to the seacoast with one of the boys, Jacob, and they are catching eels. And she can catch eels very readily. But Jacob, he is jumping and flailing and hitting his legs on the rocks, and he's sliding and he's like skinning his side, and he just can't catch the eels. And she's realizing that the way that she was raised is more in touch with nature, more brutal. She can catch it really easily, but also there's something wrong in her life, but also looking at how Jacob struggles in the natural world, she's not sure she wants to move totally toward full civilization. So in that scene, I really felt like she realizes she is something neither of Martin's world and not of Jacob's world. She is unto herself. And from there, I think she starts to question and come into her own and be really her own voice. So after this, there is a period of a few months where Turtle's father leaves, and this is a critical part where she gets to explore how she is as an independent human being. And I feel like this part is really necessary in understanding how she changes and why she changes and the things she does. So at first she feels abandoned and she feels like he's thrown away their love, but then from anger she ends up totally clearing out the inside of the house, and she drags everything out and burns it. And one of the things that she burns is, I feel, really symbolic, and she takes this like crusty, disgusting, raccoon-licked, rat-infested pan that her father had been cooking on. She burns it in the heart of the bonfire, and when she pulls it out, it peels off and the steel is fresh and new. So during this time, she does the same to herself. She clears out the house, she basically makes it really Spartan, all the dirt is gone, she washes it with bleach, and she also is hanging out more with the boys in the town. She's starting to eat again, she is bought her first bra, and she gets her period, which she realizes that whatever her life had been before, something was very wrong if she had been lacking the necessary nutrition and the necessary things to make her into the woman that she is supposed to be. So after a time, her father returns, and it is with another young girl. So at this point, Martin is grieving over his father's death and Turtle's grandfather who has passed away. And I think Martin really struggles to come to terms with how he is living his life, how he is raising Turtle, what he is doing, and I feel like at this point he is unhinged. And you really see that because he tells Turtle that he believes the only way to realize consciousness in another being is to inflict pain upon them and see if they react. And that is just a completely effed up thing to tell anyone, or to, even if you think that in terms of philosophy, to enact it upon anyone is extremely, extremely sadistic and messed up. Turtle really sees that Martin doesn't understand her at all. Martin only wants to control her and wants to control the young girl. And after her months of growing, Turtle realizes she doesn't want to be controlled. At this point, it's when Martin tells her, there's such an inwardness to you, I can't understand you. And she has flashbacks to Jacob, who doesn't try to control her, but tries to appreciate her and understand her as she is in total. She realizes that this situation isn't good, but now she can't leave because of the young girl. And when she actually rejects Martin's sexual advances, it is at that point that he turns his attentions toward the new young girl, and part of Turtle wants to let it happen because she went through it and nothing bad happened to her, but in the end she can't stomach letting it happen to someone else. And I think it's that she didn't have the self-esteem at that time to protect herself, but since her father had left, she had become her own person, and the new person can't abide by that and let it happen to another little girl. From there, the end comes on really quickly, and it is just a high-paced thriller. As I explained that the woods were kind of an escapism and a healing element, I feel that the sea and the seacoast is an element of change. So you see it a few times throughout. So the mother's death was basically the stimulus to the father's downward spiral and the start of their decrepit and twisted life together. And then at another point, she's getting crabs with her grandfather, and that's when he realizes that Turtle has been abused by her father, and he goes to confront the father, and then the grandfather dies. So that is also a moment of change, that the grandfather realizes something is wrong and goes to confront, and then there's the death, and then that leads Martin to being set off. And then also, like I said, the eel gathering scene, Turtle compares her world against Jacob's world, and she realizes that she is in between. She's of neither just the natural world that Martin kind of controls, and she's not of Jacob's world, which is pure civilization, of which she knows almost nothing. And then there's a scene where Jacob and her are washed out to sea, and she realizes then that no one is going to come and save her. She has to save herself. She has to save not only herself but also Jacob. And then this is beautifully wrapped up in the end when her final battle with her father is on the seacoast, and she saves not only herself but also the young girl. And I loved the part where she sees the flyer later, and she did not collapse on the beach. She did not die on the beach. She walked off the beach with the young girl of her own power with the gun. And to me, that was just like, I was Team Turtle in the beginning, and at the end, I just wanted to give her the biggest of hugs and just, oh man, it was such an amazing ending. And I really loved that after kind of the climax of the battle and the end of the battle, you see that Turtle is not fully healed, but she is physically healing, and she has been removed from the coast, which is like the change, into the woods, which is kind of healing and escapism, and she is trying to deal with her emotional grief, and she wants to move forward, and she doesn't want to just survive anymore, she wants to live. And I just, I don't know if this review will make you really want to read the book, or if you agree with me, please let me know what you think. I just thought this book was absolutely stunning, and it is probably one of the best books that I have ever read. I loved his writing style, I loved the story, I loved the really dark elements, and I loved the way that Turtle fought and overcame, and I just, she's one of my favorite female heroines probably of all time now, and I will read probably anything that Tallent puts out after this. So I highly, highly recommend it. Please do read it, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Yeah, so I just loved it so, so much, and I really recommend it. Yeah, so thanks for watching. I will talk to you later. Bye!